And welcome to the Startup Innovators podcast. I'm excited today. We've got Kevin Gast in the house, who is the founder and CEO of Water, a very common word, but a very big problem and a very uncommon company, like we're going to talk about in a little bit. So, Kevin, first of all, how are you doing today, Kevin?
I'm doing great, Tim, and thank you for having me on your show.
I really appreciate it. I am so excited because the story and the timing of where you are with this company and the global opportunity and the early investors in, and now the Series A, all the words you've won in 2025 and continuing some new announcements too, is so exciting. And I think the audience is going to love to hear a very creative story. So we're going to do a quick little bio, and I hope I get it right. But Kevin is a serial builder and a technologist who spent 20 plus years leading global engineering teams around infrastructure and real estate across 30 different countries. By your accent, your home was originally South Africa. Somehow you made your way to Austin, Texas, which seems to be the place everybody goes to these days to start up companies. And we love Texas, and I love Austin. But with water, which is actually spelled as two capital V's. In many parts of the world, it's pronounced Vater. So I wanted to get that clear for anyone who may see it on the site. But Kevin's looking to rewrite how we treat what is maybe the most critical resource that we have in the world today, at least for human being survival, which is water. And their core technology, it's already won a bunch of awards, and you'll share a couple, but one that blew me away was the 2025 CES 2025 Best Innovation Award. And CES is the Consumer Electronics Show. And so for those who have never heard of CES or been to CES, I've been there many times in Vegas. It's one of the largest shows, maybe the largest shows in the world. Every gadget, every new invention you could ever want to see is there, from robotics to wearables to everything. And the fact that a company that's in infrastructure and water won the innovation award, to me, says more than just this is a cool company, a cool idea, but it's a recognition of the domain itself and the scope of the global problem. So congratulations for that. That's really amazing. I think the best thing for us to do is to just jump right in. But I do want to say one other thing. If you get a chance to go to Kevin's website, number one, there's a video that is futuristic and I'll say sexy and super intriguing and beautiful and fun to watch, which is not what you expect of a company named Water in the water processing or treatment business, we would say. But what blew me away is after I finished that cool video, so it was a great hook. There were two statistics that were mentioned, and I want to run these through real quickly, Kevin, because I think anybody, including my 13-year-old son in middle school, would grasp the situation. And it starts with 4 billion people. It's almost half of the world's population experience severe water scarcity annually. As Americans, we just turn on our tap anytime we want to drink something. We don't think too much about it. But when you consider half of the world's population has this problem, I would say that's not only a large market, but significant. But moreover, the second stat that really blew me away was that 71% of the world is covered in water, yet only 1% is usable. And I think that begs the question, why? Where are we going? Sounds dangerous. So let's start off by talking about what is the problem itself and what made you start the company to try to address that.
Yeah, Tim, I think that's exactly why we named the company Water with the two V's. We're not just a West Coast gang sign, with the two V's in there. But
I love that.
it is the idea is to really focus on the problem itself. I think what a lot of people don't realize is water is an abundance. There's water everywhere, but it's never clean water, and this is the big problem. The reality is for us people, that live in the US, as a great example, you mentioned it. If you open the tap, there's water coming out, and you think it's clean. The challenge is it's not. And if you understand how the life cycle of water works, and there's definitely places, and I'm not going to generalize, but say all US places. Just here in the US, if you think about it, when you flush your toilet, that waste going that toilet goes to a wastewater treatment facility. It arrives at a wastewater treatment facility. There they have big screens that take away all the condoms, the tampons, the pads, all of the inorganics. You go through then what they refer to as a primary treatment or a secondary treatment, where they're handling all of the large solids, so the
Mhm.
bigger turds, for lack of a better word, right?
Yeah.
Um, and then eventually it goes into what's referred to a disinfection process, where they hit it with some form of chemical, be it a chlorine or whatever it might be. And then they go through a dechlorinization process again, where they try to remove those chlorines. And eventually that discharge water then is then fed down a river, down a stream, down a lake, a dam, or a well, a borehole for non-US people. And then it gets captured back into a lake. From that lake, it goes to a drinking water facility, which hits it with more sort of disinfection technologies, UV, ozone, chemicals, and then it ends up back in your tap. So here's the kicker.
That
Whenever
sounds
you,
delicious. That sounds delicious, by the way.
it's all recycled, and water has been recycled for since the age of dinosaurs. I think I did a post
Yeah.
once where I said, the water that the dinosaurs were drinking is the water that you're drinking right now. And I actually put a little photo of a dinosaur inside somebody's body, kind of a bit of an alien movie homage, to that concept. But what people don't realize, when you urinate in your toilet, you're excreting testosterone, estrogen, whatever it might be. If you are on antibiotics, those antibiotics are trace pharmaceuticals that leave your body as well. Those things, most of the time, at least 90% of the time, is not treated or handled by the wastewater treatment facility. When it goes down the river or the creek and Mother Nature needs to deal with it, she doesn't know how to deal with this, because this is not natural stuff. So by the
Yeah.
time it gets into the lake, Lake Travis, Lake Mead, Lake Austin, doesn't really matter, and into the drinking water facility, they don't know how to treat it, because UV and ozone is not going to handle that. And then it comes back in your tap. So you're just drinking that again anyway. And that life cycle is the challenge. There's water, but there's not really clean water. And that's been our mission, is to provide clean water for all humankind. And, as a company, we're very, very mission driven, and we're trying to solve that problem in all of the stages of the water cycle. Not just on the wastewater treatment side, but on the industrial side, data centers, for the AI boom that we're experiencing right now. And eventually we have a product we've developed called the Shield, which is a whole home water treatment system, water filtration system, and a water softener. And this whole initiative was driven by my past experience and my other co-founders' experience, where we've probably kissed every frog underneath the sun when it came to water treatment technologies, filters, membranes, chemicals, biologicals. And we realized that the future cannot lie in this method, because you can create the latest greatest membrane, aura membrane, infused with fairy dust, and magic increments, and you're going to still end up where these things are going to have biofouling and sediment formation on them, or a filter that gets blocked. So we naturally started going down a pathway of what does an electricity based water treatment technology look like. And that's how we ended up developing what we refer to these days as our Faraday reactors. And our Faraday reactors are the ones that won the CES Best of Innovation Award. We've won the World Future Award. And by the time this comes out, we would have announced that we also won the Time Magazine Best Invention Award for their 25th year edition in 2025. And from what I
Wow.
believe, we are the only company that's won all three in one year, giving us sort of a triple crown effect, and that's saying a lot. So I agree. The video you were talking about on the website, water treatment infrastructure is boring as hell. When you open up a magazine, there's a pump and it's blue one year, and next year when you get there, they made an innovation and they made it green, but it's the
Yes.
same pump. And I refuse to live in that world. It has to be done differently, and that's why we're disrupting the infrastructure, the climate tech, the sustainability form. We are literally turning it on, upside down, and coming up with something completely innovative and new that really challenges it. And that's why we're seen as America's next water company.
So is the issue the ability to actually get water, period, to places where the resources are low, or is it the idea of getting cleaner, safer water to people?
I think the biggest cost of water is the transportation of water. So, you can put a big dam, a big centralized water treatment system in there, but the cost lies on the piping, moving it from there to your house, to your facility. It doesn't really matter. So the real challenge is the decentralization of that. Think of solar panels and energy, or
Hmm.
generators and energy. It's the same concept. So for us, to try and come up with a decentralized water treatment system is really where the future lies. And the problem that you have with the current technologies on the market is they're hellishly expensive, super large, utilize a lot of energy, a lot of operational expenditure, a lot of capex. So it's very hard to get them to be decentralized. And I think that's where for us, that sort of difference comes in, as being able to do that with our technology.
So would you essentially, if I'm reading this correctly, would you be avoiding large municipal water treatment facilities and going directly to, let's say, a big commercial building or potentially to your house and doing it locally? Or is this something that would be done in conjunction with those, kind of like a next layer?
We want to do all of them. And the idea is because we don't really understand and know where you're going to be touching the water source or the water
Hmm.
system. So we want to fix it and try and fix it at every drop point that we can get our hands on. Obviously, from a pure business perspective, we're looking at it from an order of precedence. Lowest hanging fruits first, least barriers to entry, least amount of competition, most amount of problems, least amount of solutions. So we're taking it in a very sort of scientific, data driven approach. But yes, the idea is eventually, we want to be able to make sure when you open up the Oxford Dictionary and you go down to W to go to water, the W has been deleted and it's been replaced with two V's.
I love that. You said something that I'll tell you, I didn't know. Living here in San Francisco, the Bay Area does have delicious water. It comes from Yosemite on down through Hetch Hetchy. And I always thought that that was the purified water, had minimum has some treatment to it, and we drank that. And then the secondary water, like you said, from the toilet to the sink, all that went into processing centers to be further treated to be used for industrial applications, whether it's, whatever it is for farming and things of that nature. Even though that could still get back into your body somehow, I did not think that was going back into the lakes and the rivers that we'd eventually be drinking again. So that is, I guess that's the reality of the world we live in. And for a lot of us, maybe it's more fun to just close our eyes and pretend it's not really happening and it's just pure water. But I go through this debate all the time with my wife and friends is, um, should you have a filtering system? Is it really benefiting you? How safe is the drinking water really? And what is the technology you developed using electricity versus heavy chemical treatments at very high heats? How is that making the water safer from these things that are in it, as you said, from excrement to antibiotics to trash to a big one that bothers me lately that I've read a lot about is the high levels of what are they BPA's of plastics that are in our body from water itself and from the water sitting in the plastic bottles that come to us that we drink every day.
Well, I think I want to first say that I recall there's a study that was done not too long ago, for our West Coast, American West Coast listeners or viewers, that said that if you're living on the West Coast, there's a high probability that the water that you're drinking out of your tap has probably passed through, I think it's 273 kidneys by the time it reached your tap and you drink it. And just because of all the water that's been discharged into the rivers, then been picked up, treated again, and then discharged, and that cycle all the way down, from the north down the coast. So people don't really realize that, but they are already, in theory, drinking recycled water. Sure, that gets blended with rain and river
Yeah.
waters and other things, but primarily it is recycled. Now, to answer your question, I think if you got to break it down into a few different sections. So the first section is you got to deal with solids. These are anything from inorganics, microplastics, nanoplastics, solid components, things that have particulate size. Then you're going to look at it from a microorganism perspective, the stuff that we can't see, the bacterias, the viruses, the amoebas, protozoas, exotic species like Cryptosporidium, Gardia, Legionella, things that really want to kill you without you even knowing they want to kill you, right? And then the third one is the sort of chemical components, anything from trace pharmaceuticals, PFAS, those forever chemicals that people refer to. And I think those are the three sort of main problems that we're dealing with. And if you look at how standardized water treatment is done, you know, our technology and primarily is not really to focus on the big chunky pieces of stuff. We're not there to remove the condoms, the tampons, the pads, the inorganic
Right.
material. That's done through more conventional treatment technologies that you would have with a wastewater treatment facility. However, as you start going down in the particulate size of things and you go down the micron spectrum, then you start getting to microplastics, nanoplastics, microorganisms. And I think the easiest way that I always explain to people is, if you remember, you used to get that game called Fruit Ninja. We'd have all these fruits thrown at you, and you've got like these katana blades, and you have to chop up the fruit. So imagine we're doing that, but at a molecular level, at a cellular level, using very little bit of electricity. And we're chopping up these things in 1,000 little bits of pieces, which means you are disinfecting at a molecular level. And that makes a massive difference at the end of the day. You're not breaking things, you're not adding, the biggest issue with chlorine is as soon as you add it, you have byproducts, side products, and there's a whole bunch of really bad stuff that comes from it. So this negates a lot of those challenges where conventional technology is, yes, great, chlorine kills stuff, but I think, maybe feeding it into the aquatic center, everybody goes to some form of water park, aquatic facility. We all smell like a chemical factory after you've spent an hour in those things. You've got reddish skin because the chlorine is contaminating you. And the reason why is chlorine needs about 15 minutes of contact time to kill those microorganisms. So they got to dose the hell out of that water to make sure you've got that residual chlorine in that water. And that's a big difference. So in our technology, you don't need that. So this is a chemically free, filter free, membrane free, and biological free treatment. The closest analogy I can give you is, think of us as the Tesla of water treatment. Now, there's probably more links to that than I'd probably like to admit. As your listeners can probably hear or see, my accent is not very Texan, even though I'm based in Austin. So South African by birthright, German by blood, and then probably Texan by heart. But ironically enough, one of the first people that invested into Tesla and SpaceX, and Elon in particular, was a guy by the name of Tim Draper from Draper Associates. And
He's been on my podcast before.
yeah, so Elon was born in Pretoria, South Africa. I was also born in Pretoria, South Africa. And then when we did our original seed round, Draper and Tim and then picked up our entire seed round. And Tim said, look, the last time I invested into a South African born in Pretoria using electricity to change the world, that paid off quite well for me. I'm going to double down on you, and I've got really big expectations. So,
Yeah.
that was quite funny with those linkages to that. And that's why I think, the analogy of Tesla of water is quite probably a very applicable one.
Well, it's funny. When I look through your website, there's a photo image of for the projection of the home water system. And the minute I saw it, I think it's in a garage or somewhere like that. It's a real cool picture. And when I saw it, I thought, wow, this looks very much like a Tesla home charger that you would have with your car. Like, that's the connection, the image connection I thought of immediately when I saw it. So
And that
I
was
think
not
that's
deliberate. That wasn't
no,
deliberate.
that's exactly what I thought when I saw it. So, and it uses a low amount of electricity. So, when we think of water filtration, at least let's say for 90% of those water filtering systems, we're thinking of water coming in, not necessarily being heated up, it's being filtered out. And you also think of some level of chemicals. I don't know if they're in the filters or they come from before that. I'm imagining from a home water system, this would be something completely different because you are applying electricity to it. You're doing something to the actual water as opposed to just filtering the water. And I think that sounds to me, as a layperson, a fundamental difference in what's out there today.
Yeah, so if you think about how typical water filtrations work, they're catching things, right? So you're going through different layers of filters, and it's just a meshing mechanism, and the pore sizes become smaller and smaller, so they can catch things that are smaller and smaller, right? But they're always there. So as you keep on filtering, they're just filtering on top of the other stuff that they've caught. And that's why eventually your filters get saturated, or they start bleaching through, or they get contaminated and you got to replace the filter. It's great visually because when you're replacing your refrigerator filter at your house, and you pull it out and it's this brownish kind of color, you go, oh, wow, my filter is working very efficiently. But what people don't realize is that stuff is leaching through into your water. By the time it gets that saturated, it's bleeding through anyway. So it looks effective, but you're already drinking from those components. And this is a little bit different in that aspect. So the Shield product that you're referring to is an actual product that we ended up building. We were initially approached by a few different large strategic players. I don't mind mentioning their names, guys from Kohler, Culligan, Masco, the guys that own Delta, and Hans Grober, and said, "Look, can you do a whole home unit, that can water filter and water soften at the same time, that doesn't have any operational expenditures. You don't need to replace filters. You don't need to buy bags of salt and look at those things." And that's why we ended up developing a product called the Shield. We actually launched it a few weeks ago, and you can pre-buy it already on our website. But eventually, it will probably be available to the public by Q1 2026 through one of the previously mentioned strategic partners, which we'll roll it out with. But the idea is, if you look at conventional technology, we're probably about 80% saving on the operational expenditures. We're probably about 60% cheaper on capital expenditures. And you're looking at about a 40% less energy reduction and about a 40% less footprint. So a lot smaller, a lot more efficient, and it can treat a much wider variety of types of water to a much higher quality, cleaner water at the end of the day.
So I would think, we take that 500,000,000 people we talked about that have problems, severe problems throughout the course of the year. If we look at, we'll call it, for lack of a better word, the underdeveloped world. I have to imagine it's a significant issue because they're getting their water from local rivers, they're getting it from wells. They don't have, maybe the infrastructure isn't there for massive treatment plants that dribble their way through the veins down to these individual villages and places like that. And I'd imagine for many of these underdeveloped places in the world, a lot of diseases come from water. And so, how much of tackling that kind of global humanitarian issue is at the heart of your core business model, or is that just kind of a secondary area that we think this can make an impact in?
No, I think it's probably primary for us. We really want to make a difference on a planetary scale. I'm a father of three teenage daughters. I understand by the time they have kids what the state of water is going to be, and what the challenges are. And I want to make sure by the time my grandkids come around, the quality of water at the end of the day is much better than what it is right now. But we got to tackle the problem at its essence. And there's very few companies. I did a tweet or an X, whatever we call it these days. Saying, well, how many other true advanced water treatment companies are there in the US right now? Let the guys come out and see who we are. And there's very, very, very few. I was shocked to realize actually how small that fraternity actually is. Sure, you get these large juggernaut companies that take 6 years to make a 2-degree turn on anything they do,
Mhm.
and we're by far the underdog, the guys fighting for the people on the street. We are family members, we are fathers, we are mothers, we are daughters, we are husbands, and brothers. So we understand that our fellow community, and we're referring to our community as America. We need to make sure that we have super clean water, and eventually we can go and solve a lot of the other challenges on a planetary scale as well. And if that's through military applications, we have mobile units for quick deployment, disaster relief applications, Hurricane Elian, the Texas
Mhm.
floods, where we send what we call alpha units. We send them out. If you go on the website, you'll see there's some really cool photos of them as well, where we can drop in a pump at a local whatever water body we can get, flick a switch, and 2 hours later we have potable drinking water for the communities out there, and that makes a massive difference as well.
So, what do you think of desalination? Is it just too expensive, or is this something that would work in conjunction with that? Because the ocean has its own series of issues depending upon where that water is coming from and what's in it, thanks to man.
I'll publicly disagree with Elon when he says that desalinization is cheap and that's the future. I disagree. It is probably cheaper or cheap-ish if you look at a really high level basis, and you're a 500 billion strong billionaire. But from the common folks on the street, salinization is a hellishly expensive, large infrastructure build process, which takes years in design, years in development. The way forward is through a decentralized mechanism, utilizing or reusing water at the end of the day. Now I know there are a few other companies like Rainmaker running out there. My my interesting haired friend on that side as well, where they're saying, ionizing things in the sky and making it rain. And, I hear them, and I'll listen and smile and nod. But I'm the type that I prefer not to screw with Mother Nature too much, and not altering the climate. I'd rather just take the water that was given to us and reuse it again. I always ask the question: you wash your clothes at home, why don't you just wash your water as well? It's such a simple mentality of things.
Yeah, yeah. The funny irony of the statement about Elon Musk is that this seems like the kind of technological solution that you would wanna bring to Mars, right? Kind of micro infrastructure places where you can assemble wherever you are in pods to take whatever water they get and go through that process as opposed to building massive infrastructure to start off with. I find that kind of interesting in of itself.
Well, I mean, there was a SpaceX that came out and they said, look, they plan to have humans to Mars at a certain date. And I publicly committed to say that by the time they're ready to go, we'll have a machine ready for them that they can use on Mars as well. I haven't backed down yet from that commitment. Luckily, I'm not doing a Zuckerberg where I'm fighting Musk in a MMA ring. But I'm very supportive of what he does and the way he looks at things. And for us, colonizing Mars is just as important. And we believe we are probably the only ones that have a real solution to solve that problem.
That's absolutely amazing. Let's talk about going to market. Where are you guys? Who is your target client to start off with, and kind of where are you in that whole process? I know you're in the process of raising your Series A. You had a great seed and pre-seed round. You're moving forward, but let's talk about who's your core client and where are you in that development go to market stream?
Well, I think we looked at it from a very data incentive perspective to say, we could be attached to so many different verticals, from data centers to textile manufacturers to breweries, distilleries, wastewater treatment facilities, conference centers. The applications are endless. But things like wastewater treatment, sewage treatment, drinking water treatment have got a 2 to 3 year sales cycle. It is long sales cycles, and they're very slow to adapt and adopt new technologies as well. And,
Mhm.
and everybody wants to be first to be second in that game. So that's the biggest challenge that you always have. So we started looking at that to say, well, what's lower hanging fruit? What's quicker to market components? And we started attacking it in a very coordinated way. We obviously looked at first and foremost into the real estate and the aquatics market. There are a lot of players, a lot of developers out there that are significantly short either on wastewater treatment facilities or drinking water facilities, or they need some form of amenity that goes with it. The aquatic industry, Great Wolf Lodges, Kalahari resorts, and everybody in between, they've got massive regulatory challenges they need to meet. I know one of the names I mentioned before. They opened up a brand new facility in Houston not too long ago, and I think on day one they had 14 patrons being escorted to the hospital because one of their
Really?
contractors mixed chlorine with something else, and they had a chemical spill. And it's exactly that. So for us, there's very little competition in that space. It's a good market to be in. I think for us, food and bev and industrial is another big one. We work with some of the biggest names out there to try and assist them in three different ways. One is to handle their feedstock water going into their manufacturing facility. If this is an alcohol manufacturer, from Tito's vodka to if it's Coca Cola, Brown Forman, Jack Daniels, it doesn't really matter. What does that feedstock water look like coming in? We can help with that. And then also after their manufacturing process, whatever is their discharge, the water that's at the end of that thing, where we can assist with that as well. So that's a big difference. And then obviously data centers, the AI boom is among us. Between
Right.
ChatGPT, XAI, and Google and these guys, there's a lot of need for water. We're probably one of the few companies that are at the cutting edge of what's doable, so that people don't end up losing water out of their aquifers. We actually have the solution. We are communities that live in those areas, so I don't want my water being utilized and taken away. And I believe our solutions in closed loop treatment processes, etc., makes a
Yeah.
significant difference. So if you're a data center developer and you're listening to this, phone me. We can actually solve your community problem as well.
I think that's going to be a significant problem because the AI is driven by compute power, which is driven by data infrastructure, which requires electricity and a lot of that water. And I thought it was very promising what President Trump has, at least he said. We'll see what actually happens in terms of legislation or his ability to do this. But this idea of rather cutting through the regulatory string that you have to go through for public utilities. And this idea of data centers being able to essentially become a micro utility, authorized by the government, with potentially could bring water in and then outsource water back to like a grid. Again, this idea of decentralization, which to me is just the internet in its next wave of generation, whether it's crypto, whether it's kind of what you're doing too, it's a decentralized method of manufacturing, is the direction that we're all going in. So I think that's really, really cool. Tim is such a interesting guy to talk to. I have him on my pod. He'll just come up with 5 ideas that just make you think about the world. When you invest in like a company at the seed level, sometimes you're just investing in the individual. Sometimes you're investing in the idea. Was there a core thing that he saw in this idea when you made that first pitch, that really blew him away and made him think this could be, as he told me on my own podcast, he said, I don't look for multi-billion-dollar markets now. I only look for trillion-dollar markets to invest in, even at the seed level. What was it that he saw that was so powerful in what you were planning on doing?
Well, I think that's the beauty of somebody like Tim Draper, who's the OG, right? He's
He
able to
is.
spot companies before they become unicorns, before they become $1 trillion solutions. I mean, he was the first money in a lot of companies that are gigantic industries and entities in today's time. And I think, if you look at water as such, there's a lot of players right now generating, new nuclear reactors and this, but there's nothing happening in the water space. The innovation and so on. Yes, sure, there's a brand new company that just brought out a new filter, a new membrane, a new less contaminated chemical or whatever it might be, but actually having a disruptive technology that could change how humans deal with water on a planetary level. I think that's where the difference comes in. And we're not fly by night guys. We've built some serious businesses in the past. We come with a bit of a pedigree to it. We come from the industry, and I think that provides some confidence, and it's testament to the awards that we've won today. It's testament to how our pipeline is growing. We could be very thankful. We've got a lot of work coming in our direction, and we really appreciate that. And I think as anybody out there, people like the underdog. Uh, we are by far the underdog, competing against some seriously big juggernauts out there. I mean, the companies like DuPont and Ecolab, Viola, Suez, these are giant. There's been documentaries on Netflix about some of these guys and how they've treated water and handled water.
Yeah, I refer to them as acquirers
Right.
for a one-day exit because, like you said, if you have this new technology and most nimble startups are continuing to add to those changes very, very quickly. And in the large aircraft carrier, again, takes a couple months to turn the hull. A lot of times it's easier just to buy the company and adapt the technology. When you guys go to market with your clients, are you providing a complete built-in system? Are you licensing the technology? Like how does the business model itself look?
Well, we break it down into two different categories. We call it one as water as a service, WAS. So we sign a 10-year master service agreement with our customer. We provide all of the capital. We have a very good cap table, as well as third party financiers. So we can provide all the capital, be it a million or 500 million. We sign that 10-year agreement with them, and every month they just pay, like a photocopier or leasing a car. I always say, if they pay, the water is blue. If they stop paying, it goes black. And when they start paying again, it goes from black to blue again. And that's the simplicity really
And the
behind it.
viscosity changes too when they stop paying, right? Gets very lumpy.
Yeah, yeah. So, and then the second one is what we refer to as milestone-based payments. So a customer still signs a 10-year, 20, 30, 40-year agreement with us.
Yeah.
We then hit them on payments whenever we hit certain milestones. But the idea is we're never out of pocket. They always pay upfront for everything. Coming from these industries, we're highly risk adverse, and we want to make sure we get money collected before we actually execute.
I would think that VCs or private equity firms would love this idea because the stability of the cash flows is so long. You don't see that in a traditional, typical SaaS model, right? It's kind of there may be a certain limited contract if it's an enterprise, but if it's traditional SaaS, or you can cancel whenever you want. This idea of putting in the infrastructure and having stability in the cash flows, I would think that would open up financing doors beyond traditional venture because of that issue. And that'd be very exciting and very different. It is more along the lines of a traditional infrastructure project, although it is high tech.
Exactly. And that's exactly why we structured it in such a way. And especially with the infrastructure industry as it is, people are struggling. You have a county, a municipality, a city, for them to get a massive $100 million capital expenditure, they got to go to committees, they got to go through voting, there's budgeting, etc. But if they sign a 10-year contract and they have to allocate 50, 60, $100,000 per month as if they would lease a photocopier machine or a
Mhm.
car, that becomes a very budget friendly way of doing things.
That's really incredible. Something very, very different. When you go out with these companies, what is the typical pushback?
I think, as I mentioned earlier, everybody wants to be first to be second. So,
Mhm.
where else have you installed one of these? How many have you installed of these? I think those are the big questions. The simplistic way for us is I met a customer once and said, look, if you haven't built one in Texas, you haven't built one yet. And I said, well, I've built one in lots of other different places. So
Yes.
that's what drove us to develop our first alpha or mobile units where we have a 54-foot. It looks like it's supposed to be in a Batman movie. It's different again. And the idea was that we squeezed an entire wastewater treatment facility into this machine, and it's already been classified as one of the most advanced machines on wheels. So that if a customer says that to me, it's look, in 24 hours we'll have a machine there, we'll throw it into your local river dam, and 2 hours later you're able to drink the water yourself. And then, I think seeing is believing that therefore you don't have to go through that whole process. So I think that's probably been one of the bigger challenges for us. But the adoption rate is increasing as time goes by. And as we have more of these units come online, especially with our history and everything that we do, I think that provides a lot of surety for a lot of our customers as well.
Kevin, where did this idea even come from for you? Like you said, you were doing lots of things in your background, very diverse. Where did you finally settle in with this particular problem to attack? The origin
Well,
story, I guess.
right. So I think, water in itself was incubated in a much larger conglomerate. That conglomerate, has, I don't know how many thousands of projects around the world in various different flavors and shapes and sizes. And my co-founder is my father. So there's two Kevins. He's also a Kevin. He's just Dr. Kevin, and I'm just Mr. Kevin.
Yeah.
So that does help. And between the both of us and a few other engineers, we saw this as a bigger problem. We both have got a very sort of philanthropic history. We prefer to try and solve problems that are not solvable. And water has been in our history and our blood for a very, very long time, and all the businesses we've been involved with and run. And this is what is sort of that aha moment we also had where, you open a tap in South Africa or in Africa and, air comes out on the other end, or, a gooey brown color comes out on the other end. And you're like, this
No
can't
good.
be the way, this can't be the way we operate. There has to be a better way of doing this. And that's really where the drive is.
Well, it sounds like it was a massive problem to tackle. And you think it's obvious, right? The most precious resource in the world, and we know we're running out of it. We know there's not a lot of access in different parts of the world to it yet. I guess it's a problem that is so large that it's intimidating to so many people. In terms of resources that you need to really get to that next big milestone, we talked about you're in the process of doing a Series A. It's fairly large. It's going very well. It's supported by great early investors early on and a nice pre-seed round, fairly large. What are the other critical resources that you need to get to that next big stage?
I think, for us, you've hit the nail on the head. This is a massive problem. I think a lot of people don't realize actually how extensive the problem is. If you look at Deloitte and so many other reports coming out where they're saying, in the next 10, 15, 20 years from now, water is going to have a higher value than gold. And you probably have future world wars being fought about water because it's
Wow.
dwindling and is dwindling aggressively. So for us, that acceleration is becoming more and more apparent because we could see the inevitable coming closer and closer, and we're on a clock. So I think for us, talent is probably one of the big things. We need high quality talent. You need people that have startup experience and understand. I always say that in water, we operate in dog years. For every one day in water is a week in the human world. We move at impossible pace. We have a motto around here. We say that we can make the impossible possible. We see ourselves as sort of a special forces type in the water space, and we can go in like the Green Beret or Special Forces, SEAL Team 6. But you need special people to do that.
Let me tell you, your logo makes a perfect solid black tattoo on a shoulder.
Yeah. And believe it or not, I'll disclose it probably on this
For
podcast
special
as well. But
forces.
obviously you have two hands cupping it on the side. You have an A for atoms. You have an upside down V for volts. You have a water droplet in the middle.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on with the logo, and it was designed to symbolize so many different things. The triangle, etc.
It's futuristic. Yeah.
And the idea is that, like I said, talent for us is very, very important. We want people to join us that are not scared, that can punch way above our weight class. So that's what we're doing. I mean, for a company of our size, we are kicking butts much, much higher than most people would have ever anticipated. I think belief, adoption rate to that. So the common folk out there, the normal people out there that's listening to this, we need your support. For us, when you're going out there and you're talking to your property developer, or you're talking to your house builder, or you're talking to your council or your cities or your municipalities, just ask them, has this water been treated by Water with two V's? Because I want high quality water, and these are the guys I trust to get it done. I promise you, we'll make sure it gets done, but we need you to go and ask.
Well, that's great. And for someone who's placed over 1,000 people into companies like this, I can say early stage companies have so much to risk if they don't get that hiring point right, that we've had clients who they change their entire business model in 90 days. And the failure of, let's say, a VP of sales, if they don't make it in 4 or 5 months, you have to start all over. That could literally mean missing the next funding round or missing
Exactly.
a different milestone. So it is critical. So for anyone out there, check out the company. You're going to learn a little bit about water. If you're an investor, and this is something that's interesting to you, whether you're a private investor, a venture capital investor, PE, or maybe even a strategic that likes to invest in infrastructure and new technologies. How do people reach you today, Kevin? What's the best way?
I think the easiest is obviously to go to our website. It's just two V's, VVater.com, or you can find me on X at KGast99 as my handle. It's probably the easiest.
And I will say, I like saying Vater much better than water. So I just may switch that around for a little bit and freak out my children and my wife for a couple of days. But this has really been, it's been an honor to have you on board. It's super exciting. Like I said, for a small startup to win the trifecta, let alone just the innovation award at CES, is something for people that don't really understand the significance of that. That is a clear marker. The world is looking, and I can't wait to see what you guys do next. Thank you so much, Kevin.
Thank you so much for having me, Tim.
Cheers. The Startup Innovators podcast is provided by MatchStar Venture Search. If you are interested in any of our executive roles or need help sourcing world-class talent for your company, check out our website at matchstar.com.